Good afternoon and welcome back to another episode of The Longing. I'm recording this one a little bit early because I'm going to be a bit busy today, so I don't actually know when I'll be able to get to it other than now. But anyway, let's continue reading The Golden Age by Kenneth Grahame. The Burglars. It was much too fine a night to think of going to bed at once, and so, although the witching hour of 9 p.m. had struck, Edward and I were still leaning out of the open window in our nightshirts, watching the play of the cedar branch shadows on the moonlit lawn, and planning schemes of fresh devilry for the sunshiny morrow. From below, strains of the jocund piano declared that the Olympians were enjoying themselves in their listless, impotent way. For the new curate had been bidden to dinner that night, and was at the moment unclerically proclaiming to all the world that he feared no foe. His discordant vociferations, I don't know that word, doubtless started a train of thought in Edward's mind, for the youth presently remarked, apropos of nothing that had been said before, "I believe the new curate's rather gone on Aunt Maria." I scouted the notion. "Why, she's quite old," I said. "She must have been some 25 summers." "Of course she is," replied Edward scornfully. "It's not her, it's her money he's after, you bet." "I didn't know she had any money," I observed timidly. "Sure to have," said my brother with confidence. "Heaps and heaps." Silence ensued, both our minds being busy with the new situation thus presented. Mine in wonderment at this flaw that so often declared itself in enviable natures of fullest endowment, in a grown-up man and a good cricketer, for instance, even as this curate, Edward's apparently, in the consideration of how such a state of things, supposing it existed, could be best turned to his own advantage. "Bobby Ferris told me," began Edward in due course, "that there was a fellow spooning his sister once." "What's spooning?" I asked meekly. "Oh, I dunno," said Edward indifferently. It's just a thing they do, you know? And he used to carry notes and messages and things between 'em, and he got a shilling almost every time." "What, from each of 'em?" I innocently inquired. Edward looked at me with scornful pity. "Girls never have any money," he briefly explained, "but she did his exercises and got him out of rows, and told stories for him when he needed it. Rows, that should be. And much better ones than he could have made up for himself. Girls are useful in some ways. So he was living in clover when unfortunately they met and quarrelled about something." "Don't see what that's got to do with it," I said. "Nor don't I," rejoined Edward, "but anyhow, the notes and things stopped, and so did the shillings. Bobby was fairly cornered, for he had bought 2 ferrets on tick, and promised to pay a shilling a week, thinking the shillings were going on forever. The silly young ass. So, when the week was up, and he was being dunned for the shilling, he went off to the fellow and said, 'Your broken-hearted Bella implores you to meet her at sundown, by the hollow oak, as of old, be it only for a moment. Do not fail.' He got all that out of some rotten book, of course. The fellow looked puzzled and said, 'What hollow oak? I don't know any hollow oak.' 'Perhaps it was the royal oak,' said Bobby, promptly, 'because he saw he had made a slip, through trusting too much to the rotten book. But this didn't seem to make the fellow any happier.' 'I should think not,' I said. 'The Royal Oak's an awful low sort of pub.' 'I know,' said Edward. 'Well, at last the fellow said, "I think I know what she means. The hollow tree in your father's paddock. It happens to be an elm, but she wouldn't know the difference." All right, say I'll be there. Bobby hung about a bit, for he hadn't got his money. She was crying awfully, he said. Then he got his shilling. And wasn't the fellow riled, I inquired, when he got to the place and found nothing? He found Bobby, said Edward indignantly. Young Ferris was a gentleman, every inch of him. He brought the fellow another message from Bella. I dare not leave the house. My cruel parents immure me closely. If you only knew what I suffer. Your broken-hearted Bella. Out of the same rotten book. This made the fellow a little suspicious, because it was the old Ferrises who had been keen about the thing all through. The fellow, you see, had tin. But what's that got to... I began again. Oh, I dunno, said Edward impatiently. I'm telling you just what Bobby told me. He got suspicious anyhow, but he couldn't exactly call Bella's brother a liar. So Bobby escaped for the time. But when he was in a hole next week, over a stiff French exercise, and tried the same sort of game on his sister, she was too sharp for him, and he got caught out. Somehow women seem more mistrustful than men. They're so beastly suspicious by nature, you know. I know, said I, but did the fellow and the sister, make it up afterwards? I don't remember about that, replied Edward indifferently. But Bobby got packed off to school a whole year earlier than his people meant to send him, which was just what he wanted. So you see, it all came right in the end. I was trying to puzzle out the moral of this story. It was evidently meant to contain one somewhere, when a flood of golden lamplight mingled with the moon rays on the lawn, and Aunt Maria and the new curate strolled out on the grass below us, and took the direction of a garden seat that was backed by a dense laurel shrubbery, reaching round in a half-circle to the house. Edward mediated moodily. If you only knew what they were talking about, said he, you'd soon see whether I was right or not. Look here. Let's send the kid down by the porch to reconnoitre. Harold's asleep, I said. He seems rather a shame. Oh, rot, said my brother. He's the youngest, and he's got to do as he's told. So the luckless Harold was hauled out of bed and given his sailing orders. He was naturally rather vexed at being stood up suddenly on the cold floor, and the job had no particular interest for him. But he was both staunch and well disciplined. The means of exit was simple enough. A porch of iron trellis came up to within easy reach of the window, and was habitually used by all three of us when modestly anxious to avoid public notice. Harold climbed deftly down the porch like a white rat, and his nightgown glimmered a moment on the gravel walk ere he was lost to sight in the darkness of the shrubbery. A brief interval of silence ensued, broken suddenly by a sound of scuffle, and then a shrill, long-drawn squeal, as of metallic surfaces in friction. Our scout had fallen into the hands of the enemy. Indolence alone had made us devolve the task of investigation on our younger brother. Now that danger had declared itself, there was no hesitation. In a second we were down the side of the porch, and crawling Cherokee-wise through the laurels to the back of the garden seat. Piteous was the sight that greeted us. Aunt Maria was on the seat, in a white evening frock, looking, for an aunt, really quite nice. On the lawn stood an incensed curate, grasping our small brother by a large ear, which, judging from the row he was making, seemed on the point of parting company with the head it adorned. The gruesome noise he was emitting did not really affect us otherwise than aesthetically. To one who has tried both, the wail of genuine physical anguish is easily distinguishable from the pumped-up ad misericordiam blubber. Harold's could clearly be recognised as belonging to the latter class. Now, you young whelp, I think it was, but Edward stoutly maintains it was devil, said the curate sternly. Tell us what you meant by it. Well, let go of my ear then, shrilled Harold, and I'll tell you the solemn truth. Very well, agreed the curate, releasing him. Now, go ahead, and don't lie more than you can help. We abode the promised disclosure without the least misgiving, but even we had hardly given Harold due credit for his fertility of resource and powers of imagination. I had just finished saying my prayers, began that young gentleman slowly, when I happened to look out of the window, and on the lawn I saw a sight which froze the marrow in my veins. And with that we come to the end of the episode, because it is now past the time of finishing. So I will say thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon or night. No matter what time of day it is, I hope you all have a wonderful one of it. And as always, we will be back tomorrow for more of The Longing. Goodbye.